All right, folks, welcome. We will get started in just a minute here. We're going to give folks a second to hop on first. All right. I know we have a lot to get through tonight, so why don't we go ahead and get started? And if folks hop on, they hop on. So perfect. If you don't know me, I am Emma Schmidt. I work with Bold Alliance as the director of the Pipeline Fighters Hub, and we fight pipelines. So we are glad to be here with you all tonight. And very glad to be joined by some excellent speakers tonight. Some of the most informed folks that you are going to meet, because they've been fighting this pipeline for 3+ years. So they're gonna teach us all a thing or two tonight. Very excited to let them take over. If you have any questions at all throughout tonight, you can go ahead and either use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can also use the chat to type a question directly to the panelists. Or if you are calling in by phone, you can text me at 712-830-3748. And I will repeat that number a couple times tonight if you didn't catch it just now. And I will make sure that we get to your questions at the end. So thank you all very much. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it right on over to Chase, who is going to tell us the basics about this pipeline. So take it over, Chase.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. And welcome, everybody. I see some familiar names in the group here. Glad that you all could make it on. My name is Chase Jensen. I'm the senior organizer with Dakota Rural Action, which is a 37-year-old grassroots organizing group in South Dakota that spans from edge of state to edge of state. And we have been involved with the carbon pipeline issue for 3 years, since the first landowners got their letters in the fall of 2021. So we have been around a while. I've been around a while with this issue. And I'm glad to give a little overview of it for you here tonight. I'll start just 30,000 foot view, but we are going to move quickly so that you can directly communicate with Brian and hear from Ed of his experience in the easement team. But the big picture of this project, right, is it's a multi-state pipeline project looking to connect a bunch of ethanol plants through the region and ship all the carbon dioxide they're collecting to North Dakota, where they're going to bury it underground, supposedly forever, right? And there's going to be no leaks, no problems. This project is being funded by tax credits federally, right? So if you're new to this, maybe you've been around the block, there's some big talking points we usually always hear about. These tax credits are making this financially attractive for the pipeline company, for the ethanol plants that want to partner with them. Although the project is not without quite a few gaps and question marks to it. And so we find ourselves as South Dakotans from all across the political spectrum, from all across different ideologies and beliefs, unified with our common belief that this pipeline doesn't really make sense, and it certainly doesn't make sense for South Dakota. A couple of years ago, like I said, landowners first started getting letters from the company, and right off the bat, the first letter they got threatened eminent domain. And so that pretty much just took a lit match and dropped it in a gasoline can, because we're not too big on the private use of eminent domain in our state. And so that right away, the way that their meetings were held just incensed a lot of people. They were not transparent. And so people started talking, started sharing numbers, started getting together, and we started holding dozens of public meetings in the fall of 21 into the winter of 22 that really laid the groundwork for where we are today. Right? At this point, we've had multiple counties pass ordinances. We've been to the Supreme Court. We've been to the PUC a couple times, had a few permits denied. We've had big slog out battles at the legislature, referendums. There's been a lot that's happened in the last few years, and it all started because people like you got a letter from Summit and they joined a meeting, something like this, and they started building relationships and working together. And so I'm going to highlight a couple things real quick that we have done and sort of how we came about it. So you can tell we're not unbiased, right? We don't like these projects. We're made up of people whose families, whose farms, whose communities are poised to be really negatively impacted by them. And so we're working together to make sure that as the public and legal process for this project, as they unfold, that our interests are represented, that we have a voice at the table, that we have a plan, and that we can make sure these public processes work in our favor, and not just for the big rich corporation that is making this application. So the biggest thing that we did 3 years ago right away was, as soon as people got those letters, a few people got together and said, we've got to get a really experienced lawyer to come and represent us as a group, right? Because the Public Utility Commission process is like quasi judicial. That's the term they always like to use. Means it's basically like a courtroom. And so it's very difficult for you or me just off the street to show up and represent our land in this formal legal process. We also knew that it was ridiculous. There would be thousands of people impacted by the project, and it would be ridiculous to have 1,000 lawyers show up, right? And everyone paying out of pocket a full fee. So we developed the South Dakota Easement Team idea and based it off of a fight that happened through the last decade in Nebraska. And we're able to hire the lawyer that did that, Brian Jordy, who's on the call tonight. Get him up here and have collective legal representation, which means that when we have 100 members, it means you pay 1/100th of the cost of what it would be to hire your own lawyer. And so we wanted to make it as possible, as easy, and as accessible for people to get legal representation, top-notch legal representation, and then get as many people involved so that when the PUC has their hearings, so that when these legal meetings are happening, it's not just people in suits representing a company talking about how great it'll be. There can be hundreds of actual South Dakotans talking about actual properties, actual farms, and the actual impact it would have on their family, on their livelihood. We saw this work out great in the first two Public Utility Commission permit hearings, and we had favorable rulings in both. Both permits were denied. However, since then, there was two projects at first, and now Summit has gobbled up the remains of the first one, and they're sort of a mega project now. They've come back. They've got a lot of money invested in this, and they are not going to give up without a big fight. And so we're gearing back up for this next round of PUC hearings, which has already opened up. They reapplied now. So we're in this process, and is why we sent out postcards, sent out letters, are trying to get the news out there, because you might find yourself the way that hundreds of people have found themselves basically for the last 3 years, going on and off. You get a letter from a company. You'd have no idea, what do I do? How do I represent myself? What's even the process that unfolds, right? Like, how does this work? Very basic questions. And we want you to know that we're the people that happened to first. And we've been working at it. We've got some answers, and we've got a proven track record that by working together, by collaborating, we've been able to be pretty successful. But that only happened because we got involved, because people stood up and, put their money where their mouth was, got involved, attended meetings. And so that is sort of the opportunity for you here. We hope to present information for you. Also, the opportunity to join the easement team, to join this landowner legal cooperative, which we think is the best way that you can protect your land, and the best investment that you can make. To join up and ensure that your property gets a fair hearing, gets fair representation through the process. So I'm going to hand it over to Ed Fishback, who is a well-known face and name in this fight, been very involved the last few years, and was actually the first landowner who called Dakota Rural Action and said, we need to start holding meetings, and we need to get that lawyer from Nebraska. And so we have much to thank Ed for his leadership early on. And I'm going to pass it over to him so you can hear his experience in this fight, and also working with Brian over the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Chase. I am a farmer in northern Spink County of South Dakota, which is in the northern part of the state. As Chase said, I've been involved in this for 3.5 years now. I was one of the first landowners to get a letter that they were coming through my property, and everything Chase said about the threats is true. The intimidation that went on since that time, but some of it, and Chase has pointed out also all the wins that we've had in South Dakota because we've had this organization called the South Dakota Easement Team, and we've stuck together under the leadership of Brian Jordy, who we hired as our legal counsel, and Chase's work at Dakota Rural Action. Now they have altered the route somewhat and reapplied for a new permit here in South Dakota to our Public Utilities Commission after being rejected by the PUC a year ago. Also, they've been rejected by our South Dakota Supreme Court in a unanimous decision that ruled in our favor, said they did not have the power of eminent domain and other issues. And then the other thing is that they've been rejected by the voters of our state here just in the November election that we held here a little over a month ago. We defeated them basically 60 to 40%. Statewide, we won 65 of the 66 counties. Should have sent a message to Summit that they're not welcome with all those victories that we've had, but it hasn't, like Chase said. The money is too big that's behind this thing that's pushing it. And I just want to point out for those of you that thought this was over, that we had it stopped. We don't. We're in a very good position where we're at to have them on pause and on hold. But the fact that they're reapplying and we have to go through this whole process again over the next year to having public meetings and hearings and whatever shows that they're not willing to give up without a fight. And so we have to stay energized and engaged in this fight. And I encourage all of you, like Chase said, to sign up with the South Dakota Easement Team and retain and help us with Brian Jordy as our legal counsel. Let's do this together. That's what's been successful so far. And I might add, since they added a new route here and come up with new route to try to avoid some of us who are the most outspoken opponents, including myself, what they have done is they've moved it over on people. And just the day after Christmas, in my little town alone of Millette, which is about 250 people lives there, and I'm 4 miles out of town in my farm, they sent out over 84 certified letters to people with Millette addresses informing them on the new route that they were within a half a mile of this so-called rerouted pipeline. And that went on all over the state. So they are bringing in a lot more new people that are being affected that had no idea. Some still don't have any idea that it's being crossed on their property, and they're just now finding out. And so I would encourage you, if you're one of those people, sign up with our easement team and help us into the fight. And if you think it's over, if you were like me that were in on the original route and now you think that you're out of the woods, let me inform you as to why you're not. Last month at our Public Utilities Commission's board meeting, I was there in person, and that was in December. And under questioning, I testified, and I pointed out that on the PUC docket under Appendix 11, Summit had not removed all the previous routes that they had in mind for this project. So they were applying for a permit with the new adjusted route, but they still had the other routes in the maps up on the docket. And I pointed out to the commissioners that it appeared to me that none of us were in the clear yet. And our commission chairman, Gary Hansen, called the Summit lobbyist back up to the microphone and asked him if that were true, and if he would go on record that day to rule out those previous routes to put us all at ease that were in it on previously. He said he would not. Let me repeat that. He said he would not rule that out. So if you thought you were safe, like myself and a lot of my neighbors, because they moved it about 4 miles away from me now, we're still not in the clear. That makes it all more imperative that we sign up, we stick together. Let's see this thing through. We have our legislative session starting here in January, coming up here in the middle of the month, another couple of weeks, 10 days. And we feel very good. We've had great successes in our political arena here the last year. And we have the majorities now in the House and the Senate and the leadership. And we feel pretty confident that we're going to get some eminent domain reform bills passed. Our biggest hurdle will be trying to get whoever our governor is, looks like it could be the lieutenant governor, if he will sign it. That's our biggest challenge right now. So we need all the help we can get. I'd encourage you to hang in there, sign up on the easement team. that's up here on the chat. That's how to get in there. And please join us in helping us with our legal costs. And if you don't want to do that, I mean, even making just a donation to our easement team. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, what can we do to help? How can we send money? How can we donate? That's the way to do it. Just go on our website there and give a donation to that. And I would encourage you to please sign up with our legal services agreement with Brian Jordy. He's done a magnificent job keeping them at bay at this point in time. And we're still pretty confident we can win this thing. But like Chase said, Summit's not ready to give up. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Brian, and he's got a lot more to say. It's more intelligent than me. So I'll be open for questions.
Well, that's debatable. Thank you, Ed. I am Brian Jordy, and I want to run through a slide show here with you. Obviously, there's infinite amount of information we could talk about. There is a chat feature if you know how to go to the chat in the bottom of your Zoom window there, and you can type in any questions so we can try to tailor this as best as possible. So with that, let me get going here. And really, folks, you know, the only reason you're listening in is either you're employed by Summit and you want to hear what we have to say, and we welcome our Summit friends, or you or someone you love or land you care about is directly potentially affected by this company that thinks they can use your land better than you can and make a lot of money for themselves while putting you at risk. And so I got started in this large landowner collective legal battles over billion-dollar corporations back in 2010, and have been honored to work on lots of fights across the country. Most notably now for the last 3 years, obviously the Summit fight and Navigator and Wolf. So Summit, this is their new and improved in quotation marks route. If you're in South Dakota, the South Dakota route looks like this. The proposed route, I should say, about 700 miles crisscrossing the state, sometimes going extensive distances to pick up a single ethanol plant. And so whether you really know a lot about this or very little and are just concerned, the point of this is to say you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have been doing this every day for the last 3 years. People like Ed times hundreds are part of our coalition, and we work with good and talented people like Chase and Mark and Emma and so many others that are working to defend property rights, defend constitutional rights, and just defend the idea of common sense, frankly. Also to be against the corporate welfare that is the 45Q tax credit giveaway to these mega rich people to make them more rich, which is the only reason these projects are being proposed. So eminent domain, right? Well, that gets thrown around and no one likes to hear it, but what really is it? Well, under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution within our Bill of Rights, there is a prohibition for property, private property, your property being taken without just compensation. But it can only be taken if the project is one for public use, okay? Public use. Think the interstate highway is probably the best example. Nobody liked that, but hard to argue that we're not all able to use that to some degree, whether we drive or not, our clothes, our food, our transportation, et cetera. Then there were Supreme Court cases with kind of watered that down, US Supreme Court cases over the years, and kind of walked away a little bit from public use. The South Dakota Constitution mirrors the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution. It has that public use qualification. And there's also other laws that talk about common carrier, commodity for hire, and other kind of paths or trigger to be considered the type of have the type of status that allows one to use eminent domain against you, against your will. So one of the big things we're fighting about, it's not just Summit, it's the entire concept of the abuse of eminent domain, and we need your help to continue on that fight. So why are these projects even being proposed? Money, money, and money. Those are the three reasons, okay? The Inflation Reduction Act, nice name, but it put up to $85 a metric ton for anyone and their brother who could come up with an LLC and an idea on how to move carbon dioxide around the country. There were 3 projects at the start of 2023 proposing to transport a total of 39 million metric tons a year. Now there's 1. All right. And that one is Summit. But as Chase said, Summit has gobbled up some of the Navigator ethanol or the CO2 emitters after we beat Navigator. Recently, a couple months ago, we beat Wolf. They were connected to the ADM, an ADM plant in Illinois, going from Iowa to Illinois, and they abandoned their project. So we're 2 for 3, but the big one, the big fight is the one that's upon us. And they've got billions of dollars of reasons why they're not going to give up real easily. So in order to do that squiggle across South Dakota, which ends up being across your land, putting your legacy at risk, your way of life, they want easements, and they think they can take them, or they can convince you to sign one over. And what's an easement? Well, you are unwillingly selling legal rights and interests to your property to another, in this case, Summit Carbon Solutions. They can go on, under, across, through your property, operate 24 hours a day, have access to your property anywhere on your property. And unless that's spelled out specifically, 24 hours a day, they don't have to give you notice. You still own the land and pay the property taxes and have liability, and they get the use and 100% of the profits, sometimes forever in a permanent easement, or limited to 99 years also in some instances. And they pay you one time. You do not get paid again and again and again. It is not inflation adjusted. It is one time only. If you sell, the buyer does not get to renegotiate, period. So doesn't sound real great. So unless you want this to be your view out of your front yard, taken by clients of mine, I can't remember where this one is actually. Unless you don't want this, then you're going to have to get involved. Okay. So we talked about the easement team, and the easement team, it's a little bit of a misnomer through to its genesis starting in 2010 and spreading across. We've used the model in multiple states, I think 6 or 7 at this point. But basically the CO2 pipeline companies, Summit, they're not your neighbor. They're not your friend. All right. And you need a group to educate and empower you, a coalition of landowners. And the idea is, don't build the army after the invasion, right? A lot of people sitting around, and until the fight's at your doorstep knocking, hey, I'm from Summit, we want an easement. Well, it's like, whoa. You know, why didn't I know about this sooner? Well, because you weren't paying attention. But you're on this Zoom tonight. You need to spread and share this with other people you care about. Don't tell the people you don't like, okay? And take legal action to protect your land and legacy. And if all of it fails, if we can't get better common sense laws passed, which we're working hard at in the legislative session this year, once it starts, if we can't get the PUC to have common sense and just say no for the 3rd time, which we're hoping they will. But as you know, you fight the same type of enemy multiple times, it's hard to keep winning unless you have a big team, right? And we need you to round that out. And if all of that fails, all of that falls apart, and somehow this, terrible idea where all of us are paying for it via tax credits, if that all fails, then we want to help you negotiate the best deal to protect yourselves and not just be forced to live with the fine print that their hundreds of lawyers drafted up for their benefit, not yours. As I said, I've been at this for a long time, worked with thousands and thousands of landowners across the country. They often start off upset, confused, hopeless. We get them into the team under the umbrella, and we can fight and push back and educate, share information, feel empowered, and just be a strong, unified voice, and not individual people thinking, well, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. If all the people that say I can't do anything come together, guess what? You can do things. And so far, so good. No project I've worked on across the country has ever been built. Now, I don't want to ruin that streak, folks. So we got to keep going on this one. And we have a lot of things to be proud of. Landowner victories. Some of them you may have heard of. Last year, we defeated the Navigator project. We defeated the idea of county preemption, where Navigator, like Summit is now, is saying to the PUC, pay no attention to what those pesky counties want to do. They don't know what they're talking about. And besides, if they exercise their voice, that just slows down what we want to do, gosh darn it. And it's going to take us longer to make our billions. Well, so who's going to stand up to that? If not us, nobody. All right. We defeated Summit and their application to the PSC also in September. The primary elections were a big deal. 12 out of 12, the 14, I think, candidates up in the Republican primary were ousted. The vast majority, I think 11 out of those 12 were Summit supporters. And the message started to spread. Then we follow that up with a Supreme Court victory that Summit, based on the evidence they submitted, is not a common carrier, which means they don't have eminent domain powers. Shocker, they're back in court trying to undo that victory. We'll see how that goes. And then 2024, we won dismissal of over 100 eminent domain lawsuits following that Supreme Court victory. And then also, of course, election time defeated RL 21, the so-called Landowner Bill of Rights, which was a terrible set of laws that no landowners were any part of unless you own major shares in an ethanol company and already pledged your firstborn to Summit. So we didn't have a seat at the table, and that was a widespread statewide rejection. 60%, every county but one went our way. So we believe we have a mandate in the upcoming legislative session, but again, we need more people to give it volume, more people to give it voice. It can't be just the eds and the people that have slogged this out blood, sweat, and tears for the last 3 years. You can't ride on their coattails. You got to get involved. But hey, don't worry, the pipeline company will pay for all your damages to your land in case there's a rupture, a leak, or a spill, right? We've heard that. I mean, what's the problem? It's their pipeline. Of course, they're going to pay for it. Well, we've had clients that found out a little differently. And this is adapted out of a newspaper article years ago. Thousands of gallons of fuel ruptured, flowed downhill and into a creek from 2 ruptured pipelines, the gasoline jet fuel pipelines. And the landowner, who's our client, didn't even know the pipeline was there, right? Had no idea. They weren't the original landowners. He was helping his dad on a bulldozer, boom. And the spill of 6,000 barrels was the largest that we had in Nebraska and one of the largest in the country at that time. And the key part of the article is the last sentence. Spokesperson for a multi-billion-dollar company, when asked, didn't know if the landowner would face any liability. Well, what do you suppose happened? Did the pipeline company who said, don't worry, we'll take care of everything, after all, we're making all the money, don't worry about it? Well, they found themselves on the other end, the wrong end of a lawsuit in Nebraska federal court, not by the pipeline company, but sneakily by the pipeline company's insurance company, who is not a party to the easement, who is not giving you any promises, and who's lurking out there and can sue you, a landowner, at any time if their client pipeline company makes a claim, business interruption loss or other things. Their insurance company, here in this case Zurich, pays out, and then Zurich just steps in their shoes and says, we'll sue the landowners and allege trespass on their own land. They were trespassing. That's what the legal theory was, trespass and negligence, when they didn't even know the dang pipeline was there, didn't want it there, etc. And do you think they sued them for $1, or was it $4 million? Okay, $4 million. You don't want to be in that position, folks. The easement, there are a lot of problems with the easement. I'm not going to get into the details, but do you even know who Summit Carbon Solutions is? What are their assets? What do they own? Is that the shell company that's going to declare bankruptcy as soon as there's a problem and then reorg and say, too bad, so sad? We have no idea. Okay. Are they going to try to convert the pipeline and ship water on it in the future? I don't know. So lots of problems and questions there. Better not to be in the dark. What are the next steps, you ask? Well, the PUC process, Public Utility Commission, 3 elected officials, we need 2 out of 3 to go our way, are going to decide whether or not a route is approved, the route that is affecting you and currently applied for by Summit. So what are you going to do? You're going to sit and just wring your hands, or you're going to get involved? Well, you're going to get involved. And how are you going to do that? You're going to fill out what's called a party status application. Now, this is the technical deadline, but we are not going to wait till the 24th. You've got 10 days, folks, 10 days to get it together and figure out, yeah, help me out. I want to be involved in this. And why should you fill out a party status? If you don't, you have no voice. If you do not, you don't count. And if you do not, a month from now, when you're like, well, gosh darn it, I didn't know about, I should have done this. I should have done something. I didn't realize. Well, now you realize it. So wipe away the excuses. And if you care about your land, your property, your family, your community, your legacy, then get involved. If you get involved and think, gosh, I don't know, this is more than I expected, or this is too much, you can drop out. But if you don't get in, you can't even drop out, right? So how do you get in? Well, you can email sdeasement.org, and the fine folks there will hook everyone up and we'll get you sorted out. You can go to the PUC website, and I'll show that when we're at the end when we're done, and you can try to fill it out yourselves. It's not the easiest thing. I don't know if that's by design or the coincidence, but it is a little tricky, and it's very hard to figure out how to file it online, which is their preferred method. So step number one, get legally involved, have a foot in the door. The PUC needs to hear from directly affected people. If you are not speaking up, you are essentially saying, I stand by this pipeline and I want it. Because if you don't want it, of course you would say something, right? That's the expectation. That process goes on like a court process. If you've been through one before, discovery and paperwork and motions and fighting, developing expert witnesses, helping you all with your written testimony. If you don't want to testify and, for hours and hours, you don't have to. You just show up and say, yes, that's my written testimony. Please consider it. You don't have to be a public speaker. You don't have to be a professional witness. It's really not that bad. And I would say it actually is kind of fun. I know you probably don't believe that, but I think it is once you get into it and you got a lot of quality people to your left and to your right. In the meantime, they might be trying to survey your land. An unconstitutional law was passed against our warnings that we're going to be taken up to the Supreme Court at some point. And they may offer you $500 for a survey. Well, if you accept the $500, you're probably acquiescing that they are a common carrier and have the rights to come on to your land, because that's the only reason that the $500 would be paid. So be careful. You don't have to agree to the surveys, and you want to think twice about letting them on your land to poke around. County ordinances, resolutions, we've worked on those for the last few years, still trying to get some passed so counties get off their hands and defend themselves and put up common sense rules and regulations to protect the economic well-being of their community. There may be new lawsuits that round out and support and supplement what we're doing, and that's all part of the efforts that you would be supporting if you join up with our team. What happens at the PUC? Well, a lot happens, but if you want to take out your phone or screenshot your screen, this is important here. This is the essence of what the entire PUC process is about. It's trying to figure out, will Summit comply with all laws and rules, applicable ones? Will the project not pose a threat of serious injury to the environment or social or economic conditions? Will the project not substantially impair the health, safety, or welfare of the persons living in the pipeline proposed path? And will the pipeline not unduly interfere with the orderly development of the region, economic development, etc.? Whatever your complaints are, somehow we have to craft them into being relevant to those 4 factors. So why join? Probably because you don't want to do all this by yourself. You don't want to kick yourself and say, why didn't I? And it's not fair, and you're not being a good neighbor if you say, you guys just handle it and I'll just sit back and cheer you on. That's not going to get it done, folks. The time is now for action, right? It's about being a doer and not just sitting in the background anymore. They've brought the fight to you, so you need to stand up for yourselves. Legal actions to defend your property rights. Every 2 weeks, we have a Zoom like this. We share ideas. All questions are answered, the best tips, best practices. And like I said, if everything fails, then we're going to fight like heck to get the best deal and not the boilerplate language. So if you don't want this view out of your front door, which is from clients of mine down in Texas on a pipeline project there a few years ago, if you don't want to be looking at that, then you don't want to be doing this. Okay. You're on tonight. Congratulations. Now take the next step. We got to get you signed up for intervention status at the PUC and get it going. Come under our wing and we'll help you navigate this entire process. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen, be available for any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Just to reiterate, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them directly in the chat. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can give me a text at, ready for it, 712-830-3748. So we have had a few questions come in. So to just get us started, Jan asked, how do you join the South Dakota easement team?
Yep. So in the chat, the link is there. Basically, you'll funnel through the sdeasement.org. There's a lot of good information there. And then to fully become in the legal fight, you're essentially hiring our law firm and joining up with the collective landowners, landowner group. And the easement team can get you that information and make it happen, and will help with the party status applications. So that's
Perfect.
SD for South Dakota easement, all one word, sdeasement.org.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can you explain who qualifies for party status? Can anybody do it?
Okay, well, my reason, my thought process is apply, let them tell you no. Don't count yourself out, right? It's always like people say, well, I can't. Let the world tell you you can't. Just go for it. So at the recent meeting, the PUC has said, well, if you're within 2 miles, like if you own land, maybe a business, you're a tenant, and that's important too. You don't have to be the owner. Tenants have legal rights. So even if you had a landowner that was all for it, and you have a lease on that ground, you could apply for party status if it's in that kind of zone of danger. I'll call it 2 miles. Last year, it was 10 miles. They've gone from 10 to 2. I think they might be reaching a compromise in the 4-ish to 5-ish mile range, possibly. But put an application out there, right? Try to tie it back to your direct interest, your economic interests, and as many kind of hooks to why this affects you as you can. Just, I think today, the Ethanol Association of South Dakota signed up and basically said, well, you've got to let us in, because if this isn't approved, that would affect our economic interests. Okay, well, if that logic holds, anybody in the state should be able to get in. Frankly, anyone in the United States should be able to get in, and maybe even the world. So we'll see how they go on that. But the bottom line is, make it easy on yourself. Go to the sdeasement.org, get hooked up with the people that know what's going on, and we'll shepherd you in the right direction.
Brian, can I just add, if they do get rejected as for party status, there's still another way you can be involved. They do take comments. And so there are a lot of people that aren't even near the pipeline, particularly in West River, South Dakota, that are putting up comments on there asking the commissioners to reject the application. So you can still involve yourself regardless, whether you're an intervener or not. You can voice your opinion. You don't have to have a big, long thing, but you can just write a letter. It can be a couple sentences, could be a paragraph, and just tell them how you feel.
Absolutely.
Another question is, I already applied for party status, but I haven't heard back. Is there a way to check on that?
Yep. Let's just take, since I kind of was speed talking there on the presentation, let's just walk through this quickly. And are we recording this or no? Emma?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. I just want to make sure. Okay, so right here, puc.sd.gov, or just Google SD PUC. It'll bring you up. Well, let me just go back. It'll bring you up to the homepage. Okay, you'll see the lovely picture of our folks there, your elected PUC members. We're going to go to commission actions, because the commission is going to take action. We're going to go to the docket. We're going to scroll down to hydrocarbon and carbon dioxide pipeline dockets. We're going to select 2024, and there's only one here, so hard to go wrong. We're going to click on that. Now, once we're here, this is where the rubber meets the road. So The service list, that's who's all involved, route map, notice of the public meetings coming up. And to get to this question, so here's the application for party status. You can click on that. It'll take you to this handy dandy application that you have to fill in, which we can help you with if you like. Then party status applications. These are all the applications that have been filed. And what was the name of the person that asked that question?
Lisa and Leona?
Lisa. Leona Telkamp.
Maybe we don't have a last name, but
Oh yeah, Lisa, here we go. So here's Lisa's. And so as you can see, there's nothing next to it because nothing has been decided. If you see granted, or I mean, there's got to be some denied in here, aren't there? No, so far they're just granted. January 14th, there's going to be another meeting where they're going to blast through a lot of these and either grant or deny. And then you can dial in, by the way, and we should, if you're on this Zoom, the hard part is like, how do we stay in touch with you? So you really should put your name and email in the chat if you want to be contacted. Otherwise, when we get off the Zoom tonight, it's like, how do we ever talk again, right? You can dial in and listen to the PUC if you have the time and interest, where they're going to go through the applications and approve or deny. If you can't do that, you refresh this page after the 14th and you're going to come back and you're going to see, was I denied? Was I not? There won't be a reason of why you were accepted or denied. It'll just say that. So if you want to listen in, you got to dial in to the meeting on the 14th. So we've got a lot. I'd love to double this amount, folks. I mean, my goodness, 700 miles, and this is all we've got. We got to really do better. So I'm hoping there's a lot of you out there. But this is where it all is. All the information is here. You want to click on the land use books. You can see a color aerial map of the pipeline going across your land or nearby it. Everything about the application, the testimony, what they're going to talk about. And then there'll be a ton of motions and wrangling back and forth here over how we're going to shape and navigate the path forward on this docket. So that's where the information is.
Really quick, so if you do want to watch that PUC meeting, you just go to their website, which is puc.sd.gov, and it'll right on your homepage. There'll be a button that says watch the commission meeting live, and you'll click that and you'll be able to see it.
Yeah,
so
and if I could interject, at the last PUC meeting, I was there, and if you'll see, I'm in there. I've applied for party status, but one of the commissioners made a motion to deny me party status because, like I said earlier, the route has been moved to where it's 4.5 miles away from me now, and they're going off a 2-mile rule right now. Hopefully, the other two commissioners passed a substitute motion to take it up at this meeting on the 14th and reconsider that. So like Brian said, we're hoping they'll expand that 2-mile thing a little bit, and maybe I can get back in. But if not, we'll try to get in some other way. Also, if you scroll back up there ahead of the party status, that's where you can put in your comments if you're not on the as an intervener. And can I just make one more quick comment? If you're being contacted by Summit right now, trying to get you to survey or whatever, you're getting letters and they're trying to sweet talk you, and you think this is a different company that's changing their ways, some way they operated in the beginning, I got news for you. Because just this past week, Summit's corporate attorney out of Ames, Iowa, Jess Vilsack, sent a letter to one of our PUC commissioners, Christy Fegan, demanding that she recuse herself and threatening to sue them and her if she did not recuse herself, and if they didn't grant the permit for Summit. If they denied the permit, they would be suing them. So this is what this company is capable of. This is what they continue to do. So they haven't changed their ways. And like Brian said, don't try to work with these people on your own. Sign up with our easement team, get good legal representation, which Brian offers, and protect yourself.
Ed, you didn't mention the best part about that letter that Vilsack sent, which is the response, which was basically just, nah, I don't think so. I'm not recusing myself. Get lost. Yep.
There it
Brian,
is. Look
been
at
on
it. I mean,
screen,
she
yep.
did a great job. There's the response.
Beautiful. All right, so more questions. I think this is probably one that we would all love to know the answer to. Brian, what are your thoughts on the PUC this time around? How do you think things are going to shake out?
Well, listen, I've had good experience with them both times. Obviously, when you win, right? It's like someone asked, "Do you like that judge?" Well, if you lost, you tend to say no, and if you won, you tend to say yes. But even had we lost, I would have said it was a fair process. They really tried. They listened. They cared. They gave parties equal opportunity to speak. They were professional. So, I, I mean, I think, frankly, you're in good hands with the folks there. I'm not going to handicap or call it one way or another. Obviously, this same type of project has been tried twice and lost twice. That doesn't mean we're going to win it a third time, but it's kind of like, what's the new pitch? Because if they don't have a new pitch, then what are we doing here, people? So, and plus, since September 23rd, when we won twice in the same week, practically, the mood and the vibe and the political winds have really shifted in our favor, in our back. And frankly, it's just kind of enough is enough. Let's just deny this thing. Maybe you come back in a few years with a better plan and actually treat people fairly, etc. But, you know, I'm not going to say either way because I've been surprised before, but I feel like we're in a good position right now. But if you don't show up, you're deemed as not caring. All right. There's nothing more powerful to an elected official who is a citizen of your same state to stare out into an audience and see 100, 200, 400 eyeballs that don't want this. That's hard to go against that. It is. And so don't think for a second that your participation doesn't make a difference. It really does.
So let's say things do go awry and we do lose. Are there other ways to stop this project still? Is this the last stop or not?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you lose here and they say, yes, we like this pipeline, you can, of course, appeal and get it to the courts and see how that goes. Before the PUC decides, which will be sometime in November, likely 2025, unless this gets extended, we have January, February, March, a huge push. And we're going to be going for legislation that's no eminent domain for carbon dioxide pipelines. And it's going to be a little more fancy than that, but that's the gist of it. If we can get that legislation passed, which requires you emailing, calling the senators, the representatives, et cetera, and hounding them to pass it, then that could lead to a win of sorts. It could lead to an outright win because of the economic pressures, like, oh, we actually have to pay people fairly. Maybe we can't do this project. Or it could lead to significant rerouting and actually put it on people's land that want it only and not forcing it onto others that don't. What a concept. So that's the path, legislative path. Obviously, the PUC, we could win. There could be a Supreme Court ruling potentially on a key law here that affects the decision. So we've got some dominoes still standing, and stay tuned and get involved.
Perfect. Next question is there an identified end use for sequestered carbon?
Well, the identified end use is the 45Q tax credit, which is essentially, well, a tax credit is not necessarily a direct payment, but it's like you, massive company, Harold Hamm Continental Resources, that would pay $1 billion in taxes. We'll give you a tax credit for $1 billion, meaning you don't have to pay taxes for that portion. So that's the end use. You, government, have said we want to get CO2 out of the air. Oh yeah, well, why would I do that? Oh, you're going to pay me a boatload and make me a billionaire again? Sure, I'll do it. So there is no use for permanently sequestered CO2. The farce is they will, if this goes through, they will take our money, they'll get paid to permanently sequester it, and that permanent sequestration will last a few years, maybe a few more. And then, gosh darn it, we have an energy crisis in the world, and we're at war, and we need oil. We need American oil. oh gosh, what a coincidence. We have this sequestered CO2 you paid us for. Now pay us again to use it for enhanced oil recovery. Okay. And then jokes on all of us, and they laugh all the way to the bank. So yes, long story short, there is no use for permanently sequestered CO2, period.
Brilliant. Have you previously referred to the Satarsha, Mississippi carbon dioxide incident as a reason that the PUC should deny the permit?
Not only have we referred to it, we brought in the first responders, the people rescuing the folks that fainted, foaming at the mouth. We've brought in the emergency management. We've brought in engineers to comment on it. We've had testimony from the victims. I would say yes. And the basis of that question is someone who's rightfully thinking all you had to do is just tell them about Satarsha and this would be done. You would think that, but it hasn't been enough for Summit to get the hint yet.
I might add, at the last board meeting at the PUC, one of our commissioners, Chris Nelson, made the comment that it was his belief that he'd come to realize that the reason they only need it's requiring to have a 2 mile, being within 2 mile affected distance now instead of 10, is that if there was a rupture, it wouldn't go out and endanger anybody outside of the 2 mile deal. And I got up and took to the mic and I pointed out to the commissioners that we had this first responder from Satarsha that testified up in North Dakota that Brian referred to, and pointed out that they found victims within 8 miles and there were dead wildlife within 8 miles away. I was ruled out of order. They told me they couldn't hear that at that meeting. So if you think just because they ruled in our favor twice before, there's no guarantee they're going to again. There's immense pressure being put on them. Again, refer to the threat to Commissioner Fegan to recuse herself. There's immense pressure being put on these people to change their mind. And so we have to be on guard and we have to fight this and be prepared for everything.
Excellent points. Do we know how many voluntary easements have been signed to this point?
Well, I would say 0 because there's no such thing as a voluntary easement. No one called up Summit before they came to South Dakota and said, would you please put a CO2 pipeline on my land? That would be a voluntary easement. Okay. But Summit claims they have 60% of the 700 miles, so about 420 miles signed up, which is actually incredibly low. And that means 280 miles ish is not signed up. So, and believe me, I've got calls from the voluntary people wondering, how do I get out of this? Okay. So who knows? They don't have to tell us that. We'll ask, but they don't have to tell us. They don't have to be truthful.
And I'll add, if that were true, then how did we win the vote in November by a 60-40 margin statewide if they have all this support? And in the rural area, where it matters the most along the pipeline route, we won 70-30. So if you're talking about who has the most support, we do. We've got a 70% opposition in the rural area. And so let's refute that argument every time they bring it up about how many voluntary people they.
Perfect.
Yep.
Definitely
So
not the vocal minority that they claim. Sorry, Chase, go.
No, I was going to say there's a question in the Q&A that mirrors a question I also would pose to Brian. The question is, has the dominant team filed party status apps that are going through your firm? And then adding to that, if someone on this call says, okay, I want Brian to represent me, they fill out the contract. What's that next step for filling out the intervention? What should they do? What will you do? How do you work with the landowners to put those intervention apps in?
Sure. Okay. So yes, I mean, we hold the record for interveners ever in the Navigator, and then we broke it in the Summit docket last year. And so, yes, some of our folks, sent them in after we jointly filled them out. Some said, help, we don't know what we're doing. We filled it out for them. So yes, I mean, I've got clients, lots of them that have applications up there. Obviously, if I don't know you, we're going to need to know where's your land. I mean, you can fill out the information on the left-hand side, and then we can fill the rest out and get it sent in for you. But basically, get on board, then you're going to get connected. You're going to be in touch with the team, and we'll get that application on file for you.
Perfect.
Somebody follow up with that. Somebody, let's say, gets a copy, prints it, they're going to mail in a copy of it. Should they call the office ahead? What advice would you have for people to make contact?
Yeah, email is the best. If you send us an email and you let us know, hey, this is coming, we're faxing it to you, we're emailing it to you, and let us know, that's great. We've got a lot of eyeballs looking out for it, and we'll get it sent in. But that's why we're not going to wait till the 24th. We have an internal deadline of the 17th, because as someone that's been up, to midnight, and Emma knows the drill, trying to get all these in and people at the last second, and it's abusive of our time. I'm getting too old to keep doing that, and I'm not going to put my staff through it. So we have a cutoff of the 17th. That's 10 days from now. That's more than enough time to figure out that your land's worth your participation.
Great questions. How many family members can apply for party status? So in this example, their mother owns the farm, and their brother and I run the farm as employees. So can all three of them apply, or is it just one family member? What's the limit?
Yep, there's no limit. It's just degrees of, does it pass the smell test, right? So, but if you're an owner, I don't care if you're living on Mars right now, if you own one share of the family corporation of a piece of ground within 2 miles, you're in if you apply. If you are working on the land and say, this is my livelihood, I work here every day, I'm in close proximity, I have a legal interest, if I'm a tenant, you're in. So the easiest one is there's a legal interest, some type of ownership. I'm a beneficiary of a trust, I'm a direct owner, I'm a shareholder, I'm a member of an LLC, I'm a partner in a partnership, I'm a tenant, maybe I rent a house, maybe I farm the ground, whatever. That's the easiest. Then the next tier down would be, I work here every day, my economic interest is tied up in this. You just want to kind of make your best persuasive case. But the more direct the relationship, obviously, the harder for a PUC to deny you. But if there were 100 family members that each own one share of a 100-share corporation, you all can get in.
So would they all be allowed to testify later down the line, or just one person?
So you would have the legal right to testify. And we've run, believe me, we've how many weeks? 8-9 weeks in Iowa last year of testimony, Emma. It's not going to look very good if by the time we get to family member 50, they're just repeating all the same stuff. So let's say you've got 5 siblings that are all involved. Well, one's going to talk about safety, one's going to talk about soil fertility, one's going to talk about, different economics, yield loss. Remember, we're putting on a show. We're not trying to put the PUC to sleep. We're trying to keep it interested with new, high impact, important, concise testimony, which we will help frame. So it doesn't do any good to have 100 people say exactly the same thing, bottom line.
Perfect. All right. We've got one last question here. Would you mind providing recommended talking points for the upcoming PUC meetings and what we should be discussing with our local and state representatives?
Well, the second one is easy. State and local representative, well, state, because we're going to have these bills coming, and this is take 3. We got our teeth kicked in 2 years in a row. Okay. And now we've got some momentum. We have actually landowners in our group that are state senators and representatives now. I mean, that's the sea change we've been able to do in 3 short years. But number one, you have got to pass eminent domain reform. No eminent domain for CO2 pipelines, period. You have got to get on board and you say, I voted for you. I am counting on you. Get it done, right? And you follow that up with an email, and you followed up with an email a week late, right? Boom, boom, boom. That's the best you can do there. Local officials, if you live in a county that does not have a pipeline setback, right? A setback from where they have to be removed certain distance from certain types of structures, whether it be residences, schools, nursing facilities, hospitals, common sense things. We don't want hazardous infrastructure if we can help it. get them like, why aren't you passing a county ordinance? Like, what are you doing? Right. So those two are easy. If you go to the PUC, pretty much anything you want to talk about, because these are mandatory hearings that have to occur, no decisions being made. It's your chance to just say whatever you want to say. Obviously, the safety piece will be big. I encourage people to work on economic impacts. Like, if this comes through, I'm going to take X amount of acres out of production. I'm going to be going to the county assessor and asking him to reduce my taxes. I talked to my insurance agent and they won't even cover me. They won't offer me coverage on this. And I'm worried if there's third-party claims that it'll wipe me out, because anyone can say it could explode. It could explode. I could die. That's all true. Well, it doesn't technically explode. It could rupture and you could die. Okay. Doesn't make you probably feel any better. But the economic hook and framing it in economic terms is sometimes more powerful for regulators that are, sometimes victim of, we got to be open for business. South Dakota is open for business. Well, it doesn't mean we have to be open for dumb business. Okay. And it doesn't mean we have to be open for any business. Okay. And what about the businesses we already have? Maybe we should protect our family farms and ranches before we roll out the red carpet for a unproven company that doesn't treat people very well and a bad business plan. I don't know. So, really you can hit on all of those things.
Excellent. All right. Well, it is 8 o'clock. So unless folks have any last minute questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up. Or do any of our speakers have any last thoughts before we head out?
Folks, again, I have done this for 15 years now across the country. And the worst thing someone can say to me is, I wish I would have heard of you sooner, because I didn't know you guys were out there and I didn't get involved. And I wish I would have stood up at the time, or I wish there would have been a group like yours in my state when this happened to me. Don't let that be you. Okay. Get involved.
Yep. And I would add to that, the strength of the easement team has not just been a bunch of individual people who can put their head down at night because they got someone working for them now. It's hundreds of people across the state working together, having regular calls, sharing strategy, sharing information, resources, and then having that legal expertise. And so if you're thinking about this, thinking you need to join, the next best thing that you can do is go talk to your neighbors and get them to join. Not only is it going to lower the cost for everybody, making it more available for other people, but it's going to build our strength. There's going to be something unique about their farm, about the impact it has on them, that's going to be powerful at the PUC hearing. And so we need you as a member, but we need your neighbors, we need your family. And so if you buy into this project, into this easement team idea for your land, consider talking to your neighbors about it too, spreading the word, spreading the resources. And that sdeasement.org website has a recording of the last call we had, so they can go on and hear this same conversation we're having tonight. But get involved now. It's like planting the seeds, right? You can do it now, but if you miss this season, this window, you're going to have a rough season later on in the year. So now is the time to get involved, put some legwork in, and it'll pay dividends later.
And I might add, despite all the work I did in the beginning to organize our coalition, I couldn't have stopped this, nor could our coalition stopped anything and be at the point we are right now if we hadn't had Brian representing us. Because he is the real reason that we have this stopped in South Dakota, with all the work he's put in at the court system and at the PUC previously, at the previous hearings, calling the expert witnesses, doing the cross examinations. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal expert. I could never do that kind of work. And this man, he's brilliant at that stuff. And we're here where we are because of his work. And that's why I can't stress that more diligently to you people that are considering it. Please, you couldn't get any better representation, and please consider signing up with us and joining us.
Thank you all for those words of wisdom. Oh,
I was just say checks in the mail, Ed. It's coming your way. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So we will go ahead and end it there. If folks, come up with any questions, anything like that after we get off tonight, feel free to reach out. sdeasement.org has all our contact info. And I put this in the chat, but for folks on the phone, if you don't actually know if, if your land is directly impacted by the pipeline route, proposed pipeline route, you can send me an email and I will look it up for you. So my email is emma@boldalliance.org, and happy to do that for folks. I know there's quite a few people that aren't totally sure what with all the changes we've seen with this proposed route. So feel free to reach out. And with that, we'll go ahead and call her a day. So thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.